And as we count down to Copenhagen, one of the ways to cut carbon emissions is through a program called REDD, Reducing Emissions from Deforestation and Degradation. The program allows developed nations to pay developing countries not to cut down their forests as a way of reducing greenhouse gas emissions. Well, in D.C. today, there was a panel discussion on how REDD can fit into a cap-and-trade plan. Clean Sky's Lee Patrick Sullivan was at the discussion and is here now with more. Lee.
Well, Susan, deforestation reduction programs have been tried in the past, most recently the Noel Kempf Climate Action Project. Now, that program brought together American Electric Power, BP Amoco, and Pacificor with the Bolivian government. In that plan, the corporate giants were paid the Bolivians not to cut down their forests, and in turn, the companies received carbon offsets. Now, that program was criticized by environmental groups, most notably Greenpeace, as a carbon scam, saying there's no way to verify that the protected forests would have been cut down if there wasn't an agreement. Now, these topics were discussed today here in Washington as proponents of REDD argued that dollar for dollar, deforestation reduction is the best way to reduce carbon emissions.
It's absolutely impossible to achieve the global objectives that the world's major leaders have established for climate change, which are to reduce deforestation by 50% globally by 2050, without being even more ambitious in the forest sector. And that's because these are the emissions that we can address now. No new technologies are required to stop cutting forests. We have the ability to control these emissions, and it's where developing countries are showing that they're most eager to participate in a global system.
And with U.S. climate change legislation most likely not passing before December, experts say that REDD could be something that countries do agree on during climate change talks in Copenhagen.
It is very clearly, I think, the issue area where there's the most convergence between major developing and major developed countries over a way forward that would actually bring major developing country emitters into a global emissions control regime in a way that they regard as in their interest. And since this entire impasse is really about who has to do how much by when, and there's a general agreement that the industrialized countries that historically are the most responsible for the problem have to act first, but at the same time, the atmosphere doesn't care where the emissions are coming from, and the developing countries rather, now account for more than half, and are where emissions are growing most rapidly. There has to be some equation that brings everybody in somehow. The one area where there's real kind of promise is in REDD.
Now, Susan, when REDD is brought up in conversation, the country that is most associated with is Brazil. Proponents say that country's carbon emissions are 65% deforestation. Now, if Brazil can reduce that number of the forest acreage being cut by 80%, which is their stated goal, it will have a huge impact on global emissions.
No doubt. All right, Lee Patrick Sullivan, thank you.